The early guns do look ridiculous to us, but they were the state of the art during the time. The Hakenbusch is essentially a pipe with one end closed off and a hook at the other end to help stabilize. Very primitive.
The Hakenbuchse, or hook gun, began to appear along with other types of hand cannons in the 1300s. Paintings and drawings of the time show these awkward weapons in use, but they hardly had much impact in the way war was waged. Incredibly, a few of these guns have survived. This one dates from about 1440 and is about as primitive as they come.
No trigger, no hammer, no stock, just a rudimentary tiller. Typically, this weapon was fired by two men.
Forged more than 5.5 centuries ago, this gun is so simple, the experts are confident it can still work. But there remains some doubt. After all, it hasn't been fired in more than 300 years. As the handgun evolved, so did its name. From the German Hakenbuchse, the French turned it into Arquebus, and the English Harquebus, the weapon of Humphrey Barwick. The Harquebus was the first weapon that I did use. It is a weapon most offensive that as yet ever was invented, and in the hands of a skillful soldier, most terrible and deadly. The Harquebus of Humphrey Barwick was part of an arsenal that included the slightly larger musket, a name eventually used for all guns of this type. To ignite the weapon, a soldier carried his match, a rope soaked with saltpeter, so it would smolder reliably without going out. With the refinement of corned gunpowder, the handgun's barrel became long and narrow. Its crude mounting pole became a true shoulder stock. And finally, it included a simple mechanical firing device called a lock. The three essential ingredients of every shoulder arm, even today: lock, stock, and barrel. Appearing around 1450, these first mechanically firing guns were known as matchlocks, a tremendous breakthrough in their day. Many older handguns had to be held with one hand and ignited with the other, but the matchlock allowed troops to use both hands to level and aim the weapons. But preparation and loading was still cumbersome. Bullets went in from the front, and a priming pan had to be filled to ignite the charge in the barrel. If it misfired, you got the proverbial flash in the pan. But the matchlock was usually reliable, and when it came to fire, all was needed was a pull on the trigger. Matchlocks were widespread by the late 15th century, but 100 years later, when Henry Barwick was using one, a controversy raged. Traditionalists favored the deadly longbow, viewing guns with contempt. Humphrey Barwick answered back. The archers in times past were the best shot there were. And yet in these days, where weapons of fire had been rightly used, neither horse nor man is able to bear armor sufficient to defend their bodies from death.
Ironically enough, the longbow is a ballistically superior weapon when compared to the musket. It has a much longer range, 3 to 4 times. The archer can shoot at a much higher rate than a musket, and yet there's one fundamental disadvantage to the musket that the longbow has that Humphrey Barwick missed, and that's the economics.
For years, the longbow had won the English their battles, but guns were simply cheaper. A skilled archer needed a lifetime to train. A skilled gunman needed only weeks. Military armor, already galvanized against the longbow, was made even stronger to protect against bullets. But muskets, the more powerful cousins to the arquebus, could pierce armor at close range, heralding the